Good afternoon, everyone. So, I know that there are still folks online getting their lunch, and we're very sorry that you all are still waiting to eat your food, but we're already a little bit behind schedule, and so the organizing committee has made the decision that we should press on and move forward, and so hopefully you all will be able to grab your lunch quickly and move to your seats and be able to continue to enjoy the discussion. But so we will ask, if you don't mind, if you will be so kind as to keep the volume down back there on the lunch line to a minimum so that folks here in the room can experience and enjoy the conversation. We hope the morning sessions have been informative. Once again, I'm Marco Davis. I'm your MC for the day. Today's workshops have covered a wide array of topics from early education to cultural wealth models to growing our own bilingual teachers. They've all been brought to you by Massachusetts practitioners and educators from throughout the entire state, or I mean Commonwealth of Massachusetts. I know you're very particular about that. These contributions and the intentional focus on Latinx students enrich all of us. So I want to thank all of our speakers and workshop presenters. Can we give them a round of applause? And remember, there are workshop sessions immediately after this session, part of which is why we need to press on and try to get on schedule so that we allow the proper time for the discussions this afternoon. And of course, I'd be remiss if I did not thank the P's organizing committee for their leadership and their drive and their persistence in making this event and future P's activities possible. They bring an unapologetically Latino lens to equity and accountability deliberations in Massachusetts. It's a perspective that is all too often missing at the highest levels of our schools, our institutions, and our systems. So let's have a round of applause also for the P's organizing committee once more. Okay, and now we're going to take a systemic lens, a systemic look at this work. We have the opportunity to bring this perspective to the state commissioners of education, each of whom oversee an important part of the apparatus that guides education opportunities for all our children and young adults. I'm going to have a seat in just a second, introduce our speakers, and then I'll ask them each a question in kind of a rapid-fire, round-robin kind of way, and we'll engage in a dialogue that helps us see how and where this work can be advanced through each of their successive areas. So, give me 1 second as I switch microphones. All right. Ooh, this one's louder. All right, so first let me do some quick introductions to get you all up to speed. So we have first Commissioner Samantha Aigner-Treworgy, who is the recently appointed Commissioner of the Department of Early Education and Care. She oversees a department that licenses approximately 9,000 child care programs and provides financial assistance for more than 56,000 children to attend high-quality learning programs that support their growth and development. Her previous positions include Chief of Early Learning for the City of Chicago, where she led implementation of the city's early childhood plan to provide universal full-day pre-kindergarten to all 4-year-old children in Chicago, and she oversaw a budget of approximately $350 million in early childhood funding across multiple city agencies. Early in her career, she was a pre-kindergarten teacher in Evanston, Illinois. She holds a master's in social service administration and a master's in public policy from the University of Chicago. We have Commissioner Samantha. Next, we have Commissioner Jeffrey C. Riley. He's Massachusetts' 24th Commissioner of Elementary and Secondary Education, leading the Commonwealth's 404 school districts that are charged with educating close to 1 million public school children and 20,000 adult learners each year. Commissioner Riley's experience spans urban and suburban districts and includes teaching, school administration, and serving as the superintendent receiver of the Lawrence Public Schools. During his more than 6 years in Lawrence, he led a team that brought about major improvements by shifting more resources and autonomy to the school level, expanding the school day, increasing enrichment opportunities, and ensuring that all schools had great leaders and teachers. Commissioner Riley holds a master's degree in school administration, planning, and social policy from Harvard University. That's my Massachusetts accent. Santiago is the Commissioner of Higher Education for Massachusetts, where he is responsible for providing overall direction to public higher education in Massachusetts and helping shape state-level policies that maximize the benefits of higher education for the Commonwealth and its citizens. His past academic appointments include that of Chancellor of the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee. He brings over 30 years of experience in public higher education and holds a PhD in economics from Cornell University. Of note for our event today, Commissioner Santiago is also the author or co-author of 6 books and has published dozens of articles and book reviews, many of which focus on economic development and the changing socioeconomic status of Latinos in the United States. On 2 separate occasions, in 1996 and 2011, Commissioner Santiago was named one of the 100 most influential Hispanics in the United States by Hispanic Business Magazine. So we're joined by distinguished leaders, individuals who are in critical roles in public service, serving all of the students here in the state of Massachusetts. And we're going to have an exciting conversation on the Latino community. Please join me in giving them a warm welcome. All right, so as I mentioned, I've got a question or two for each of them to maybe kick us off. Start at the beginning, which I think is where you often want to start, in the earliest years. So, just to kick us off, Commissioner Samantha, as with all students, early childhood education is the beginning step towards success on the education continuum. For Latino students, Latino, Latina, Latinx students, how is the Department of Early Education and Care defining its role within the equity conversation to ensure the success of those children, youth, and families, and the workforce? What strategies do you think have proved most effective?
Yes. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me, and to the PEAS conference organizers for planning such an important conversation today. I'm really happy to be here with my fellow commissioners and talking about the full continuum of education as it relates to Latino and Latinx students. I want to start with the importance of early childhood education and then the strategies that we are using to really think about equity infused in the policies and regulations that the Department of Early Education and Care is trying to revamp. Early childhood education is the start of a path to success, and we see tons of research coming out about the brain science, but also about how early you can actually detect the achievement gap in young children as early as research coming out is 12 or 18 months now. So if we look at, those are things like language acquisition and expressive language, and if we look at how we can support children from the very beginning to prevent the achievement gap before it starts, early childhood education is a key component of that strategy. In addition, another element of early childhood that is unique across the continuum is the integral role parents play from birth. Obviously, parents are a critical advocate and teacher for children throughout their education, but at those first earliest years, incorporating parent education, incorporating parent engagement is another key element of making sure that we are really culturally responsive to the families that we are seeing. So the 3 strategies I really wanted to focus on as we talk about what the Department of Early Education and Care has as an opportunity to address the equity challenge in education are looking at access, the content, and then also how we define high quality. First of all, when we talk about access, is really being intentional that we are providing access in the earliest years to high quality programs, to children, to Latinx students, and really focusing on barriers that are specific to Latinx families in accessing programs. There's the child care agencies, as you mentioned, the 9,000 child care agencies that we license across the state, and the over 50,000 subsidized families that we support in attending that early education and care opportunities, that come with a lot of barriers, particularly if you're talking about immigrant families who may not have may have language challenges in accessing the many forms and files that it required to access subsidized care. Really focusing on how we can break down some of those barriers and support strategies within the community to provide access to families with dual language learning students particularly. Second is the content and competency. So really thinking the first as the system barriers that we might have in place that we need to break down so students can access the care. But second is what is the care once they attend, and really thinking about the competencies and content of the curriculum as being appropriate and culturally responsive for Latinx students, making sure that our teachers understand how to support students in the earliest years in a culturally responsive way, bringing implicit bias into the content of the curriculum as we're training teachers, so that we're putting that topic on the table from the beginning, and helping teachers really be sensitive to those students that are in front of them, and not only throughout their learning and training. And then third, from a systems level, again, is really defining what we mean by quality in a program. So we are currently working on rolling out a new quality rating and improvement scale, which defines what criteria a program must meet in order to be considered quality by the state, and at various levels of quality, and ensuring that in that we have specific cultural criteria that are culturally responsive to Latinx students, and not trying to develop something that is, or it is developed, not trying to roll out something that is assuming everyone fits into one mold.
That's great. Thank you. Very comprehensive. And clearly a critical area that we need to continue to keep attention on. So let's shift over to elementary and secondary education. So Commissioner Jeff, resources are often sort of at the heart of a conversation around K12 education. So my question for you is, how does increased funding for K12 education translate to better supports for Latino, Latina, Latinx students?
So we know probably 6 or 7 years ago, the Foundation Budget Review Commission acknowledged that the funding formula was broken, or at least off kilter. And as the superintendent receiver in Lawrence for the past 7 years before I took this job, what I saw was that we were being dramatically underfunded. And this was happening in other gateway cities, other urban areas, other rural communities, and it wasn't fair. And we want to applaud what's happening now, where we think we're going to get a bill that's going to fix that funding formula. In fact, when I saw the resources that could be going to Lawrence, my first thought was, can I go back? Because our kids deserve to have, an appropriate education, and we were shortchanging our kids, and we needed to do better. We know that our kids can do incredible things, but we were scrambling with the resources we were given to make gains, and it shouldn't have to be that difficult. So we applaud the legislature for working on this problem. We think that it's going to be a real win for our kids. I would say this, is that the dollars will be going to individual districts, and there's less oversight in this bill than there was in 1993 by the state. And so it's going to be incumbent upon us to make sure that districts spend their money well to make sure that our kids get what they need.
That's right. Thank you. Thank you. And I see there's enthusiasm in the audience for those responses. Okay, and then shifting to post-secondary education, Commissioner Carlos, what would you say, particularly in context, if you will, or with using the frame of the equity agenda, what would you say are the investments that need to be made in post-secondary ed in order to better support Latinx students in higher education?
Thank you. First, I wanted to just mention that it was a delight having lunch with the other two commissioners. You should know the three commissioners got into a raging debate over lunch, and the issue was that really flan or is that vanilla pudding? We're still hashing that one out. But let me, as someone who makes flan, I had an opinion. The issue of investment in higher education, particularly in public higher education, is absolutely essential to this agenda. Let's be honest, this is a big agenda, and without resources, it's not going to work. It simply cannot work. So we have to look, and from the department's perspective, we're looking very carefully at financial aid. Massachusetts does a lousy job providing financial aid to our students. We are near the bottom of the states. We provide $120 million, which sounds like a lot. Kentucky, a state with not the wealth that we have, with a similar population, provides $300 million. Public financial aid right now covers maybe 10% of tuition and fees in our institutions. So that has to be directly addressed. I applaud what is happening in K through 12. It's absolutely essential that students, as they go through the pipeline, are supported. However, the question I would have, and it's not to my fellow commissioners, but rather the powers that be, is so what happens after they get their high school diploma? Our institutions, our public institutions, are severely underfunded, and they have been for a long period of time. We need to provide funding so that affordability is taken care of. We need to cover the cost of tuition, as we have in the community colleges over the last year. Tuition, fees, books, and supplies, but there's more than that. We need to provide, particularly in our community colleges, 2/3 of Latino students go to community colleges in Massachusetts, 2/3 to our public institutions. That is the least well-funded of any segment of public higher education in Massachusetts. So if we're serious, we have to have a conversation about the equity of funding to the various segments as well. We need to provide support to our institutions to provide the support services which were mentioned earlier today that have to be provided to these students, many of which are first generation. So if we do not make the kinds of investments, and we're not asking for $1.5 billion, but think of this. We've been working very carefully with K through 12 on early college high schools. We now have 18 designated in Massachusetts, and the students that go through those high schools have been performing quite well. And they're getting college credit before they get to college. Not a dime has been put in the budget for early college for now the second year. We need to revisit what we're doing. We need to revisit the investments and the outcomes that we're going to get from those investments.
Great, thank you very much. So then, swinging back around now to early education again, Commissioner. And I want to start now with a couple of questions that kind of point to kind of the overlap, the connecting three areas, because as we all know, it is truly a continuum, and it's not something that should be completely isolated. And in fact, as you'll see, there are areas in which there's actually quite a bit of if not, in fact, overlap, influence, and impact between the two. So, for example, Commissioner Samantha, the early childhood education workforce. It's a very diverse workforce. There's a whole set of steps and needs in terms of training and certification and so on and so forth. And there's a potential interesting nexus point, right? Particularly engaging our communities, providing both educational as well as academic opportunities for the workforce as well as for the children being served. So what are some of the latest innovations in your department? What are some of the ideas you have about ways to support that workforce to help them become more effective in serving many of our children?
So yes, and I think as Commissioner Santiago is saying, is that this is an access issue as well as a content issue. And so really thinking about how we prepare our early childhood workforce is not only how do we have the content available to a variety of different people interested in the field, how do we provide content in a variety of languages so it's accessible, but also how do we recruit people from communities into the early childhood workforce. And that is both about how we make our content responsive, but also how we break down the barriers that they may face in accessing a career pathway into early childhood. So I have to admit that as about 2 months into the job, I'm not completely familiar with every single innovation that we have been working on, but I did want to highlight a few that I think that are specifically helpful in this regard. We have been developing a set of core trainings for providers that talk about health and safety and requirements for the the staff that are in our centers and family child care homes already. And those are, of course, available in multiple languages, but also provide an entry pathway for a parent who may be interested in entering the early childhood field, which is a key component of being able to recruit a more diversified workforce. And as well as working with the community colleges and thinking and through partnerships, not only in our scholarships and grants and capacity building programs, but also thinking about the partnerships at the community level that can provide things like wraparound services, child care, food, transportation to be able to provide a workforce, provide supports for people interested in climbing the career ladder in early childhood who may not have the resources available to be able to if only coursework is covered. I do want to say, I think the other component that we have to think about and why I focus on the early childhood career ladder is that the early childhood workforce is incredibly, it is made up by a variety of different individuals and a variety of different levels, everything from paraprofessionals to certified teachers to family child care home professionals who may be opening their home and space to children for out-of-home care. What we find is that the diversity across our workforce is actually very varied. And so for our family child care home providers who are small, independent operations and have, as I said, opened their home, we have almost quarter of that workforce is Latino or Latinx. The child care center workforce, when you look at that profile, it drops down to under 15%. And so that disparity, when we think about the pay wages, the pay gap, and how you actually can build towards sustainability, self-sustainability through the early childhood and early childhood profession, really thinking about how we build support across our mixed delivery system for professionals is a key component to equity and making sure that Latino workforce is supported.
Great, very helpful. Am I? No. Okay. We thought we had it fixed, but we'll be back shortly. Sorry. All right, shifting then to elementary and secondary education, Commissioner Jeff. What ways do you see of deepening the collaboration with higher education to ensure that Latinx students not only see themselves as college going, but actually make the transition onto successfully into post-secondary education?
So
Wait, keep talking. Let's see.
I used to be a middle school principal. I can help.
I was going to say,
We're just going to share the mic.
Here you go. Try that one.
Hello?
Yeah, that one.
So I think Carlos and I have been working together on a number of initiatives. As he mentioned earlier, the Early College Initiative is something that's near and dear to my heart. In Lawrence, we have almost 300 students involved, either going to Northern Essex Community College or Merrimack College, and the success there has been pretty overwhelming. And many of my children were first-generation kids, and we felt like by having kids have an early college experience, we were more likely to inoculate them and get them oriented to college, and they're more likely to persist going through college and actually graduate. What I've seen in my time in urban areas is a lot of kids will go to college, but then sometimes wash out with tens of thousands of dollars hanging around their neck. What we need to do is make sure that our kids are successful when they go to college. And so having this early college program where they have a more supportive environment, we have counselors working with them, and having them have success in high school, in my opinion, is going to lead to us making sure they actually graduate and then enter into the workforce in higher paying jobs.
Great. And actually, as a quick follow-up on that, given that we know in Massachusetts, like sadly throughout the nation, there's such a shortage of guidance counselors, what thoughts, what ideas do you have about ways in which we can give that guidance to help make sure that students are knowing that college is a good option for them?
So we really do not do a great job right now of counseling our kids for college across the state, and mostly that is due to the limited number of guidance counselors we have in the state. My hope is that with this additional dollars that are going to be showing up in school districts, that they will use some of that money both for college counseling, but also for mental health services for our kids as well. Superintendents are reporting, kids coming with more and more acute issues at an earlier and earlier age, and our job is to make sure that our kids get in a place where they can receive instruction And so we need to make sure that they get taught well, and then we need to advise them how to get into college, so it's a both and.
Great, thank you. Okay, then shifting on to higher education, Commissioner Carlos. How do you, where's the one I was going to say? Oh, yeah. Speaking of the ways in which there's overlap and intersection as well from a different angle, we know that there's a critical element played by the folks who are actually doing the educating of the students, right? And so higher education has that unique role of being the place where teachers and faculty are prepared to lead in the classrooms at both levels, K12 and higher ed. And actually, frankly, even in early childhood ed, right, and receiving child development associate degrees and so on. So what ways do you think that higher education might do to try to help ensure that those new generations, new cohorts of people preparing to be faculty and teachers and child education providers are a more diverse population and reflect the students they serve better? Are there innovations there?
Yeah, one of the most difficult challenges we face at all of our three levels is really in terms of getting more faculty that are looking like a changing student body. It's a huge challenge for us. And you know, in my experience, in my time in higher education, I've seen practices that have failed miserably at that, and some few that have worked. So there are a couple things that I would recommend. One is you have to create the pipelines. You have to start at the earliest age. You're not going to have a student that just comes to a college doorstep and says, oh, I'm going to be a faculty member, especially when they're first generation. And we have to change our HR practices on our institutions. I think the president of Greenfield Community College, I know she was here earlier, her institution, under her leadership, did something really, I think, courageous as I went to visit the campus. They closed down, literally closed down 2 searches in which the 3 finalists were white males. And they basically said, if you do not have a diverse set of finalists, you're not going to proceed. And my own experience, there are a number of things that I did as department chair all the way to chancellor. You have to create what I would call an oasis in these institutions. It's not sufficient to bring in faculty of color to institutions that are predominantly white and expect them to be welcomed and to succeed. You have to change the culture in those institutions. You have to create safe spaces for those faculty that come in, and it's a lot of hard work. We had, when I was a provost at the University of Albany, we did something that the lawyers kept telling me. They said it was bordering on illegal. And my response was, we'll do it until the lawyer, someone tells us to stop. What we did was this, there was a hiring in a department that would come out and have no diverse finalists. And I'd basically say, whatever field it was, take political science, and I would say, I will find you a qualified, generally Latinx candidate for that position. And I'd go out and do that, and we'd bring them into the department, and the department would interview them, and their next issue is, this person is really good, but it's not in the specific field that we're looking for. We're looking for international relations. This person is in comparative. That's not what we're looking for. So the president at the time, we worked on a plan which basically said, okay, you hire the person in the field that you want, and you hire the second person as well. You hire them both. And then that second person, the Latino, Latina that would be hired, would have to be in our academic unit as well, so they would get the kind of support services. This, lawyers tell me, is something you cannot do. But it was successful. We had among the highest percentages of Latinx faculty in the nation for an institution that was relatively small. So sometimes you have to kind of break the rules a little bit and see how far you can get and create the pipelines for new students to get the training they need.
Right. And just Challenge the lawyers to find the legal way to do it, basically, is what I always say. Challenge the lawyers to find the legal way to do it. That's what we pay them for.
The answer I would say is not all laws are just.
Well, there's that as well. Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you for that. All right, well, the time has really flown by, so we're going to switch now to closing comments. I want to give you all a chance in case there's anything you would like to make sure to share, that anything I didn't ask about that you think is important for this audience and clearly for the work that they're doing that's so essential for the Commonwealth of Massachusetts going forward. So let's start off once again with Commissioner Samantha.
Try this one again? Nope. Okay. There you go. I want to close on three, I think, key priorities for early childhood that we need to focus on if we really want to address the equity gap in access and in quality. And those are access, how we look at access, how we look at quality, and how we support the workforce. And I want to go back to Commissioner Santiago. Resources are critical to do any of those things. We have 20,000 children on our wait list right now who would like access to subsidized care and can't get it because we don't have the resources to offer. So really focusing not only on making sure we're offering more opportunities, but that we are using data to make sure that those opportunities are accessible to all families, and particularly breaking that down and looking at making sure that we are offering access that is reflective of communities, that is reflective of the Latino population within specific communities. Secondly is quality, and that cannot be understated. What we know from early childhood research is that access to bad quality programming doesn't achieve the goal of starting children off on the right foot. So really making sure that we're focusing on that quality, and that quality is culturally responsive and is culturally relevant and inclusive of parents and the skill set that parents bring in. And then thirdly is the workforce, and really focusing, and we've spent a lot of time on this, but I want to highlight that early childhood is one of the most underpaid workforce in all of the industry. And so when your choice between going into a very highly stressful early childhood job where children are screaming and crying and doing all the things children do, and going to work at Target or Walmart, it's a hard choice to make at the same salary. And so we really need to focus on, if we want to recruit a workforce that is diverse, we also need to focus on making sure that workforce is adequately paid and able to deliver the kind of responsive practices that we know children need.
So for us in K12, we have several initiatives around deeper learning, but the one that's near and dear to my heart, I think, is building a teaching corps that's more reflective of our student population. Right now in Massachusetts, 40% of our kids are kids of color. Only 8% of our teachers are. And so we are making great strides in trying to change that dynamic. We're offering things like tuition reimbursement for future courses, also debt that kids are accumulating from college. We're trying to provide money for that, signing bonuses for kids, for future teachers, I call them kids, sorry. Training our paraprofessional corps up to be teachers, making sure that we pay for their testing and things like that. The NACA program is something I would strongly recommend you all look into, where this is a mortgage program where prospective teachers can get a no points, no closing cost mortgage, and if the average rate today is 4%, they could get a 30-year mortgage at 2%. And that's another perk that we can offer kids, prospective teachers, to come into the field. So Carlos and I have been on tour at the various colleges trying to recruit kids, prospective teachers, to come back and teach in their own communities. And it's pretty exciting, and we're very hopeful about the possibility. So please spread the word.
Thank you. Great. Commissioner Carlos.
Thank you. I would just leave you with one thought. The success of higher education is dependent upon the success of these two commissioners. I think all three of us think very similarly about the priorities of equity for the institutions that we lead. I think we are working hard to align policies so that there is a smooth transition for students, so that the issue of remediation is not simply a higher education issue. It's K through 12 and all the way through. It's third grade scores that students may get. And I think that's, I've not seen that before. I've not seen the kind of integration that we're beginning to develop. And I think that is a key element that oftentimes is not highlighted, but I think it's crucial to, at least I feel it's crucial to the success of higher education in this endeavor.
Great, thank you so much. So let's give a round of applause to our three commissioners. Thank you all for being here. I do want to share, it's important for you all to know that all three of them have committed to continuing engagement and partnership with PEAS. So look for many more conversations and collaborations to come. All right, updated schedule. You might have noticed we're behind a little bit now, so I wanted to share with folks. We're going to start the round of afternoon workshops at 1:25 p.m., so in a little less than 10 minutes. So get your jogging shoes on to head to the classrooms. And then we will return here and start the afternoon plenary at 2:20 p.m. We're going to start promptly at 2:20 p.m. And if you all don't know, our afternoon plenary keynote speaker is none other than Pedro Noguera, who has joined us here today, who is one of the foremost and most dynamic speakers on education as a civil right in the nation. And he's going to issue a call to action at the end of the day in that closing plenary and session. So it's something not to be missed. So once again, we have the students in the back of the room holding up signs for the workshops that you hopefully will select, and we'll see you back here shortly. Thank you, everyone.